Is DW News live from Berlin. Tonight, Facebook's CEO Mark Zuckerberg faces off with the European Parliament. Zuckerberg apologized to European lawmakers for the recent data scandal at the social media giant. He says the company was too slow to react after user data was manipulated.
Breaking news in the Volkswagen emissions scandal. Federal prosecutors today filed criminal charges against 6 company execs for their role in the scheme.
Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes has been sentenced to 11 years in prison for defrauding investors. We're live in Los Angeles.
Was arrested in the Bahamas late yesterday. This after the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York shared a sealed indictment with Bahamian authorities. The move setting the stage for a likely extradition and a U.S. trial.
Success seems impossible, doesn't it? At least without giving up your morals and everything you believe in. When time and time again you look around you to the biggest companies, the most wealthy people in the world, and you see them being corrupt, doing wrong, doing illegal stuff, really, and getting away with it, not being punished, getting a slap on the wrist and going on, it really makes you believe that this is the path you have to take. If you look at Amazon, they did it. Facebook, they did it. Uber did it. Even, I don't know, like something like Volkswagen did it when they cheated the tests. So why shouldn't you? They're bigger than you. They have more money. And you that doesn't have any of that, why shouldn't you go down the same path? You have to, don't you? Wrong. What if I told you that it is possible to become extremely wealthy without having to sacrifice your morals and end up doing wrong things to get there? That you can focus on what you love, what you are called to do, and to do it right without having to play all these schemes, all these games, and really end up having been a Congress hearing. Well, if it does sound too good to be true, I promise you it's not. What I'm here to do today is to show you an example that shows all of this, of a man that not only became extremely wealthy, but did so in his own way, pursuing what he loves, staying true to his ideals, going against what people would expect him to go, essentially sacrificing profit for his morals when the time came so, and that was always rewarded along the way for it. This is none other than Yvon, oops, almost spilled my coffee, this name that I can't quite pronounce. And first of all, he began by founding this name Equipment, and then later on a company that I'm sure you've heard of, Patagonia. This is a man that started dirt poor, even having to eat cat food in the beginning, as we're gonna look at, building a $3 billion business, and when the time came to do so, giving it all away to charity as he was still alive. Now, if this all seems too good to be true, and that these things were handed to him, and that's why he was able to afford to, live according to his morals and to sacrifice the way he did, I promise you, it was not. Everything he had, he earned, and he worked for it, and what he sacrificed were things that he worked for. Now, to better understand how this happened and how you can replicate the same for yourself, maybe not becoming a billionaire because certain things are out of your control, but to become wealthy, doing what you love, and above all, remaining moral and correct, we have to dive deeper into the story of Yvon, going back to 1938, if I'm not mistaken, all the way to the small town of Lisbon, Maine. Born in Lisbon, Maine in 1938, Yvon was one of 4, the only boy. Almost from the moment he was born, he was introduced to his love of climbing, having it done, as he says, before he could even walk. His incentive was the upstairs neighbor that would give him a spoon of honey if he would climb up the stairs. His mother was the adventurous one in the family. And in 1946, she had the idea to move to California, where she hoped the dry climate would be better for his father's asthma. So they auctioned all of their possessions, the 6 of them got into a car, and they just drove away. Now, Yvon was what you'd likely call a rebel loner, spending most of his youth by himself, really doing whatever he pleased. And I'm going to read here some of the things involve hiding in a golf course to fish from the pond, gigging frogs, trapping crawdads, hunting cottontails with bow and arrow, and, most dramatic of all,
swimming in a foam-filled hole fed by an outflow pipe from the film developing labs at one of the movie studios. As he tells us, if I ever get cancer, it can probably be tracked back to that time. Now, high school was no better for him, and he constantly found himself in trouble, having to write the stereotypical, like Bart Simpson, "I will not," hundreds of times. However, he was smart about it because he found a way to glue 3 pencils with rubbers in between, so you could essentially triple the work for the same effort. Now, it wasn't all bad, because eventually he did find his friends, his tribe, people that he understood and that understood him, and they started, at 15, the Southern California Falconry Club. Now, obviously, the name is pretty self-explanatory, but they were responsible for enacting the first regulations around falconry in California. It's pretty impressive for a 15-year-old. As Yvon tells us, it was the most formative time of my life. When a 15-year-old has to trap a wild goshawk, stay up all night with her until the bird finally develops enough to trust to fall asleep on his fist, and then train the proud bird using only positive reinforcement, well, the Zen master would have to ask, just who is getting trained here? Until he graduated, most of his time was spent outdoors, climbing with friends on adventures and overall doing whatever he wanted. With so many near-death experiences, it is a miracle he survives. However, what is life without a little risk? Now, it all changed when, skipping ahead to 1957, Yvon found himself in a junkyard and he bought himself a used coal-fired forge, a 138-pound anvil, and some tongs and hammers to learn blacksmithing. Why? Because he wanted to make his own gear. Now, the reason was very simple. He wanted to climb Yosemite. But to do so, you were required to take pythons and place them on the rock, hammer them onto the rock to serve as anchors for your rope, so that you place the rope as you go ahead and you climb. The problem is that at the time, these were meant to just be hammered away and left there. You see that the difference here was that most of them were European. And at the time, the European approach to rock climbing, going to the mountain and climbing, was one of conquering the mountain, to leave your mark, to show that you had been there and you had conquered the rock. Now, Yvon's approach and his peers at the time was a completely different approach. They were inspired by Emerson, Thoreau, and John Muir, and they had a mindset of leaving no trace they had been there. These were the beginning of what one day would turn to Patagonia. So he spent April to July in Yosemite, and then he headed out to Canada to avoid the heat, and then in November back to Yosemite. Now, during this time, he would afford and, take care of himself, selling from the back of his car, just like this, his pythons, his gear, and all of that stuff. As he tells us, the profits were slim though. For weeks at a time, I'd live on 50 cents to $1 a day. Before living for the Rockies one summer, my friend Ken Weeks and I bought a couple of cases of dented cat food cans from a damaged can outlet in San Francisco. We supplemented the cat food with oatmeal, potatoes, ground squirrel, blue grouse, and porcupines assassinated a la Trotsky with an ice axe. He slept 200 days a year in his camping bag, most of the times outside, not even in a tent. So very different from your average billionaire or average person that made it wealthy. As he tells us, they took special pride, as he writes, in the fact that climbing really had no economic or any value to society at all. They were rebels from consumer culture and everything at the time, and he took pride in it. Now, in '62, he was shipped off to Korea from the military. However, due to causing problems with most of the officials and most people there, he was sent to work with civilians. At the time, as he tells us, he only had to turn on and off a switch, which he paid someone else to do, which then allowed them time to climb. During this time, he would do so with the locals, as you can see here. Now, in '64, he was discharged, and in '66, he moved to Burbank, to a place probably looked like this. Very humble beginnings in a rented tin boiler room from a slaughterhouse, I believe, to start like that. As time passed, demand grew. However, here's when we find one of the key principles, one of the two main reasons for this video, and I'm gonna share Yvon's words. Quality control was always foremost in our minds, because if a tool failed, it could kill someone. And since we were our own best customers, there was a good chance it would be us. And looking here at the first principle, the first main thing that Yvon teaches us, and that, in my opinion, all of us should adopt, and that is to make quality work. Truly quality work, not just something you're kind of happy with that other people may be kind of happy with, something that you know you gave it your all, and it really is not only the best of your efforts, but it is something good. Now, the reason for this is not just because you will sell more of what you're creating, even though you will, especially if you're in the business of, well, anything, whether that's a service or a product, but because by doing quality work, truly quality work that then you share with others, you'll be fulfilling a need people didn't even know they had. It's like you're scratching an itch that they just became aware of. And this is so important, not only because in this process, you will fulfill your own desire, which let's say in a company's case is you'll become wealthy, you'll make a good company with your values, with your morals, without having to become corrupted, essentially. But above all, is that you are helping the world become better. Because in this process of fulfilling people's needs, helping them, finding a solution for this problem that then allows you to solve your own problems and do it so correctly, you make the world a better place. And when you do this in this way, making quality work, selling quality work, and being valued by the quality of your work, you are allowed to not compete on prices. You are allowed to not play these games that inevitably lead you to become corrupt. If I have a company and I start just, going about who has the best margins, and that's all I care about, I'm going to become corrupted eventually, because there will be a shortcut to take. There will be something that's wrong to do, but that will help me make more profit. And you see this, you look at Nestle, you look at any of the companies I mentioned before, and that's what happened. They started good, Apple did the iPhone and things that we still use, we still really care about, or Facebook or whatever company it may be. But somewhere along the line, they lost track of what matters. They lost track of why they were doing this in the first place, and they started looking at profits, at margins, at all these things, and then quality work took a second step. And that's why it's so important. However, as we're going to see, quality work is not everything. And without the second part of this, it may become irrelevant. Now, the company was initially called Chouinard Equipment, and Yvon would spend up to 10 hours every day doing blacksmithing work. Now, for context, this is hard work, hard labor, impact on your body. I assume you end up, at the end of the day, absolutely exhausted. Now, with this said, they kept growing, sales kept doubling every year. However, they barely had any profit. Now, why was this? Well, simply, it really ties to what we just talked about, the quality of work, because Yvon would spend most of the money trying to improve what they had, creating new products, and really pushing things forward. And this, full investment in the doubling of sales led to, by 1970, Chouinard Equipment became the largest supplier of climbing equipment in the United States. Now, all was great with Python's, business was doubling, all was good. The problem is that on one of his climbs to Yosemite or L something, I'll put the name here, he realized just how much damage it was doing, because since you had to hammer it onto the wall, it would leave a mark. And many people doing this, I'm going to put the picture here, would leave a big mark. They found another way. The European aluminum name I'll put here as well would not cause this. And you could put and remove and it would all be fine. Well, the problem was that this was the best seller. And how do you go from the best seller to the other without people being resistant to it and really not wanting it in the beginning? Well, you don't, because in the beginning there was a lot of resistance around this, and a lot of people didn't want it. Regardless, he pushed through. They completely fizzled out of that business and sold only the new aluminum European ones. What happened here was very funny, because a few, I believe, months later, our original Python business had a trophy, so those things weren't selling anymore, and they were on the cutting edge of the new thing. However, this required, and this is where we find our second lesson, is that it does require you being willing to burning the boats and just overall burning everything, because he was willing. If it didn't work, then, well, we're not going to sell the other ones again. It was the best seller, but it's fine. It does require this ability to just say, if I lose but keep my morals, so be it. Because when you think about it, is it really worth it if you have a few extra zeros on your bank account, new car, the house, all that, but you don't feel good with yourself, you don't keep the morals as you're doing it? I would say no, and Yvon would say no. And he shows us that it is okay to say no to these things and to actually still succeed and to still build this company, to do these things living true to who you are.